My name is Jason Mitchell. I'm 34 years old and I serve as a captain in the United States Army, with 12 years of active duty under my belt. Each day begins before sunrise, the crisp morning air filling the base as I walk through the rows of tents and barracks, checking on my unit and making sure every soldier is ready for the day ahead. Leadership in the military isn't just about orders. It's about knowing your team, their strengths, their fears, and the subtle ways each person can rise to a challenge or falter under pressure. I carry a schedule packed with briefings, training exercises, and administrative duties, but I make it a point to walk the floors and corridors greeting my soldiers by name, noticing small changes in demeanor that might indicate stress or fatigue. My team knows I expect the best from them, but I also understand the human side of service. There's a delicate balance between discipline and empathy, and I've learned that trust is earned by consistency, fairness, and showing up for people when it matters most. At home, my life is quieter but no less disciplined. My wife Emily understands the demands of my job, and our two children, ages 8 and 6, often see me rise before dawn and return late in the evening. We've built a routine around my military obligations, and family dinners, bedtime stories, and weekend hikes become sacred rituals to maintain normalcy. I carry the weight of both my duties to my country and my responsibilities to my family with equal care, knowing that neglect in either realm carries consequences. But beneath the surface of daily routine, there's a simmering tension I've kept to myself. Within the ranks, not everyone plays fair, and I've witnessed favoritism, neglect, and underhanded maneuvers that threaten the cohesion of the team I've spent years building. It's the kind of pressure that makes late nights feel endless, where you question not just your judgment, but the loyalty of those around you. Yet I take solace in the clarity that comes from preparation, vigilance, and knowing that when the moment comes, I will act decisively. Every morning as I put on my uniform and adjust the insignia on my chest, I remind myself why I chose this path: service, leadership, and the quiet hope that integrity and patience can overcome the chaos that inevitably arises in both military life and family life. This story isn't just about one day or one decision. It's about how small, deliberate actions can ripple outward in ways no one anticipates. The first sign of trouble came in a meeting I had with my commander, Colonel Reynolds, a man whose reputation for charm often masked a deep disregard for the people under his command. I had spent weeks preparing a detailed report on our unit's readiness and logistics, highlighting areas that needed immediate attention to prevent operational failures. I expected him to at least acknowledge the work, maybe even ask a few probing questions, but instead he dismissed my report with a wave of his hand and a patronizing smile. It wasn't just the dismissal that stung. It was the way he took credit for initiatives I had spearheaded, presenting them as his own achievements during a briefing with higher-ranking officers. I sat silently, my jaw tight, watching as my ideas were lauded while I was overlooked, the sense of injustice burning quietly inside me. I could feel the weight of exhaustion from years of early mornings and late nights pressing down, yet I knew that reacting impulsively in that moment would only reinforce the narrative that I was unprofessional or emotional. Later that evening, I walked through the barracks, noticing the subtle signs of strain among my soldiers. Some had heard snippets of the briefing and approached me with hesitant questions, unsure how to reconcile their respect for me with the orders coming from a commander who seemed untouchable. I reassured them with calm words, but inside the frustration churned. It wasn't just about recognition. It was about the integrity of the unit and the fact that leadership could fail so openly without consequence. As I sat in my quarters that night, reviewing operational logs and personnel reports, I began to connect the dots. Colonel Reynolds had been overlooking critical safety protocols and misallocating resources, all while appearing competent to the outside world. The realization hit me slowly. This wasn't just a one-time slight. It was a pattern of negligence that could have real consequences for our soldiers' safety. I felt a cold knot of anger mixed with resolve, understanding that careful observation and timing would be crucial if I wanted to address it effectively. I thought about my family too, how the stress from these dynamics often bled into my evenings, leaving me mentally exhausted even when I was physically home. Emily had noticed my quiet frustration, asking gently why I seemed distant during dinner, but I could not articulate the depth of the betrayal without sounding paranoid or bitter. I kept my focus on the bigger picture, knowing that emotions would need to be managed while I gathered facts and prepared for the right moment to act. Sleep came fitfully haunted by flashes of meetings, unchecked errors, and the subtle arrogance of Colonel Reynolds. I replayed conversations in my mind, noting inconsistencies and moments where accountability was conveniently ignored. Each observation added fuel to the quiet fire inside me, the kind that doesn't explode in anger, but rather plans meticulously waiting for an opportunity where justice and strategy could intersect. By the time dawn broke, I had resolved to do more than silently endure. I would collect evidence, verify every detail, and ensure that when the moment arrived, I could act decisively without compromising my integrity. The frustration and moral conflict were still there, simmering under the surface, but they had been transformed into a controlled determination. I knew that patience would be my ally, and the first act of betrayal by my commander had unwittingly set the stage for the reckoning to come. The following morning, I returned to my office with a quiet sense of purpose, knowing that the key to shifting the balance of power in my unit was likely hidden in plain sight. I began combing through operational documents, training logs, and personnel files, my eyes scanning for inconsistencies or overlooked details that could give me leverage. Hours passed as I meticulously cross-referenced memos with execution reports, noting discrepancies that the commander had either ignored or failed to understand. It was during this deep dive that I stumbled upon a clause buried in the standard operating procedures, a small yet powerful regulation that had gone unchallenged for years. The language was technical, almost bureaucratic, something most officers would gloss over in favor of routine compliance. But I recognized its potential immediately. If applied correctly, it could shift control over key resources and decision-making authority to whoever understood it fully. I leaned back in my chair, letting the gravity of the discovery settle. This wasn't about revenge. It was about strategy and accountability. Colonel Reynolds had overlooked it entirely, assuming that no one would notice, and in doing so he had left a door wide open. I carefully mapped out how activating the clause could influence our unit's chain of command and force a reconsideration of decisions that had previously been beyond question. As I drafted scenarios and projected outcomes, I realized the complexity involved. Any misstep could jeopardize the safety and cohesion of the team I had worked so hard to build. Each calculation, each contingency plan had to account for both the immediate tactical effect and the longer-term consequences on morale and trust. I felt a quiet confidence in my ability to navigate this terrain, tempered by the weight of responsibility that came with knowing the full scope of what I was about to do. In the quiet of the office, I reviewed communications and notes I'd accumulated over months, identifying patterns of neglect and favoritism that had allowed inefficiencies and vulnerabilities to accumulate. Every oversight became a piece of the puzzle, every ignored suggestion a clue to the commander's complacency. The more I analyzed, the more the path forward became clear. By carefully leveraging the clause, I could correct long-standing issues while demonstrating the importance of vigilance and expertise. I spent the evening simulating outcomes, considering potential reactions from colleagues and subordinates. I imagined the commander's face when faced with an unanticipated application of a rule he had assumed to be irrelevant. There was a thrill in understanding the depth of the strategic advantage I now possessed, not in triumphing over someone but in the quiet knowledge that preparedness and attention to detail had created an opportunity no one else had seen. By the time night fell, I had a detailed step-by-step plan ready, the sequence of actions laid out with precision and contingencies accounted for. I knew when to act, how to act, and what signals to watch for. The sense of anticipation was palpable, but it was controlled, deliberate. I was no longer merely reacting to betrayal. I was poised to transform it into a turning point guided by careful observation, patience, and unwavering confidence in the power of preparation. The next morning, I arrived at the base early, my mind already tracing the steps of the plan I had spent the previous evening refining. I began implementing small, seemingly routine adjustments to the scheduling system and supply allocations actions that on the surface appeared mundane but would trigger the mechanisms I had identified. My subordinates noticed subtle changes, questioning minor shifts in procedure, but I offered calm explanations that masked the underlying strategy, maintaining the illusion of normalcy while the plan quietly unfolded. I moved deliberately, double-checking every detail, ensuring that each action would align with the clause I had discovered, while also protecting the integrity of the unit. The commander remained oblivious, preoccupied with appearances and routine inspections, unaware that the balance of control was beginning to shift. The sense of anticipation was palpable as I monitored reactions, noting small hesitations and micro-expressions that hinted at confusion and curiosity among the team, signaling that the effects of my actions were already rippling through the chain of command. By mid-morning, minor disruptions began surfacing. Supply reports showed discrepancies that could not be immediately explained, and a few team members came to me for guidance, unknowingly stepping into the path I had laid out. I provided steady instructions, each choice reinforcing the conditions that would later validate the clause, all while remaining calm and composed. Every interaction, every observation was carefully calculated. I kept my demeanor neutral, offering reassurances without revealing any hint of advantage. The commander's confidence remained unshaken in his own assessment, which made the unfolding events even more compelling, the slow burn of suspense intensifying as I watched the system react exactly as predicted. By afternoon, the first signs of tension became unmistakable. Miscommunications and minor errors began to cascade, and whispers circulated quietly among the unit. Soldiers approached me discreetly, seeking clarification and leadership, unaware that I was orchestrating the unfolding events. The energy in the room shifted subtly, a mix of uncertainty and heightened awareness, as I maintained control with careful, deliberate measures, allowing the plan to take root before revealing its full impact. Each decision was measured, each action purposeful. I had transformed quiet observation into controlled execution, and the team's perception of normality masked the growing tension beneath the surface. The anticipation of the next stage was building, and I knew that the full effects of the plan would soon make the shift in power undeniable, setting the stage for the dramatic revelation and plot twist that would change everything in our unit. By late afternoon, the effects of the plan were undeniable. Communications that had once flowed smoothly were now disrupted, revealing errors and omissions that exposed the commander's negligence in plain sight. Colonel Reynolds entered the operations room expecting routine updates, but his confident demeanor faltered as he realized the anomalies were systemic, not accidental. Soldiers approached me discreetly, seeking guidance, their eyes filled with a mix of confusion and relief as they began to recognize that the chain of command they had trusted blindly was flawed. The tension in the room grew as I calmly demonstrated step by step how the clause I had discovered shifted authority in a way that corrected the mismanagement without harming the unit. The commander's shock was evident, his attempts to assert control failing against the quiet precision of the changes I had implemented. As I outlined a sequence of events that had led to the exposure, the murmurs among the unit turned into acknowledgement and cautious respect. Colleagues who had doubted my judgment now saw the logic and foresight in my actions, understanding that what appeared as disruption was actually a safeguard against ongoing negligence. Colonel Reynolds, once unassailable, now faced the undeniable reality that his oversight had left the unit vulnerable, and that the initiative to correct it had come from me. I felt a quiet satisfaction, a sense of justice tempered by professionalism. There was no gloating, only the calm assertion that the unit's integrity and efficiency were restored and leadership had shifted in accordance with experience and knowledge. The commander attempted explanations and reassurances, but the clarity of the evidence left little room for denial, and the soldiers' confidence in the chain of command subtly realigned around my authority. By evening, the operational flow returned to stability under my guidance, and the team began adjusting to the new structure with renewed focus and morale. Colonel Reynolds, humbled yet maintaining decorum, accepted the situation, recognizing that leadership was now shared with someone who had both foresight and a commitment to the unit's well-being. The twist was complete. What began as overlooked opportunity had become a decisive turning point, demonstrating the power of careful observation, strategic planning, and ethical execution. The room settled into a quiet order, and I finally allowed myself a deep breath. The balance of power had shifted, justice was served without chaos, and the unit emerged stronger, more aware, and more cohesive than it had been before. In that moment, I understood the profound impact of patience, knowledge, and deliberate action lessons that would shape both my leadership and the future of those under my command. The aftermath of the plan was both subtle and profound. The unit underwent a careful reorganization with roles reassigned to match skills and experience more effectively, and procedures adjusted to prevent the oversights that had allowed the commander's mistakes to persist. Soldiers who had once operated with quiet uncertainty now displayed a renewed confidence, recognizing the clarity and fairness in the chain of command. I spent time with individual members of the unit discussing lessons learned and encouraging open communication, emphasizing the importance of accountability and vigilance. By reinforcing these values, I helped cultivate a culture where initiative was recognized and neglected responsibilities were addressed before they could escalate. The commander, though humbled, accepted the changes with professionalism, understanding that leadership required adaptability and the willingness to acknowledge errors without resistance. Reflecting on my own decisions, I realized the importance of patience and careful observation. Acting too quickly might have created chaos or resentment, but the measured approach allowed the team to witness competence and fairness in action. I also recognized that leadership was not simply about authority, but about creating an environment where trust, respect, and competence could thrive, simultaneously strengthening the unit as a whole. Over the weeks that followed, small successes compounded into larger improvements. Operational efficiency increased, morale stabilized, and the soldiers demonstrated heightened initiative, empowered to contribute ideas and take responsibility within the framework I had established. The commander, while no longer the sole figure of authority, had learned the value of collaboration and oversight, gradually rebuilding credibility by embracing the revised procedures and supporting the unit's growth. Personally, I felt a sense of calm and fulfillment that had little to do with personal recognition. The satisfaction came from knowing that the unit was stronger, safer, and better prepared for future challenges, and that every decision I had made was grounded in integrity and strategic foresight. My role as a leader had evolved not through confrontation or ego, but through deliberate action that balanced justice with responsibility and authority with respect. By the time routine had settled back into place, I could look across the operations room and see a team functioning with clarity, purpose, and mutual trust. The experience reinforced a critical lesson: effective leadership often requires observation, strategic patience, and the courage to act decisively when the moment calls for it. It also reminded me that true success is measured not by power over others, but by the positive, lasting impact one can have on the people and mission entrusted to them. Looking back on the events that unfolded, I realize how crucial integrity is in every decision, no matter how small it may seem. Standing firm in my values allowed me to navigate a complex situation without compromising my principles, and it reinforced the understanding that ethical leadership can coexist with strategic action. Resilience, patience, and observation were my allies, guiding each choice with clarity and purpose, even when emotions threatened to cloud judgment. I also learned the importance of self-advocacy, not as a tool for ego or personal gain, but as a mechanism to ensure fairness and accountability within the system. Speaking up when something is wrong, documenting issues carefully, and understanding the rules that govern your environment can shift power dynamics responsibly and effectively. By acting decisively but thoughtfully, I was able to correct systemic problems while maintaining trust and respect within the team. Equally important was the realization that leadership is not about exerting control over others, but about empowering them to perform at their best. providing guidance, setting clear expectations, and demonstrating competence earned the trust and loyalty of my unit far more than authority alone ever could. True influence comes from consistency, fairness, and the willingness to act ethically, even when it requires confronting uncomfortable truths. Through this experience, I saw that moments of betrayal or injustice do not have to define your response. What matters is how you prepare, observe, and leverage opportunities to act in alignment with both your values and the greater good. Patience and strategic thinking are not signs of passivity. They are deliberate choices that can transform adversity into growth, turning challenges into lessons that strengthen both character and leadership. I want viewers to understand that standing up for yourself does not require rash decisions or disregard for others. Ethical action often means being methodical, careful, and deliberate, assessing the situation fully before taking steps that ensure fairness and accountability. It means knowing your environment, recognizing vulnerabilities, and using knowledge to create solutions that benefit the collective rather than serve only personal interests. Ultimately, this journey taught me that integrity, resilience, and strategic patience create a foundation for long-term success and personal fulfillment. The satisfaction I felt was not from power or revenge, but from restoring order, protecting my team, and acting in a way that aligned with my principles. Leadership, I realized, is measured by the impact you leave on those you serve and the respect earned through consistent ethical action. So ask you, when faced with a situation where your values are challenged or your contributions are overlooked, how will you respond? Will you wait passively, or will you act with integrity, strategy, and courage to protect what is right? The choices we make in these moments define not only our leadership, but the character we carry forward in every aspect of life. As weeks turned into months, I found myself reflecting often on the journey that had reshaped both my unit and my own approach to leadership. The soldiers had adapted to the new structure, operating with a sense of purpose and clarity that had previously been clouded by uncertainty and inconsistent oversight. Their growth and confidence reminded me that measured action and strategic thinking could create lasting positive change beyond the immediate resolution of a conflict. Life outside the office had also shifted subtly. Evenings spent with Emily and the kids carried a new sense of calm, a recognition that the stability and order I worked to foster at the base had spilled into my personal life. Family moments felt lighter, more intentional, and every interaction seemed to echo the lessons learned in patience, observation, and the careful balancing of responsibility and authority. Challenges still arose, of course, as they always do in a dynamic environment like the military. Operational issues, unforeseen emergencies, and the occasional misjudgment reminded me that no solution is permanent and that leadership requires ongoing attention and adaptability. But the confidence and trust that had been cultivated within the unit allowed these challenges to be met with resilience and collaboration rather than fear or uncertainty. I also noticed the change in the commander, who now approached leadership with a renewed awareness of accountability and the importance of collaboration. Our interactions, once tense and cautious, had grown professional and mutually respectful. The shift was subtle but meaningful, a reflection that even entrenched attitudes can adapt when confronted with competence, fairness, and clarity of purpose. On a personal level, I felt a quiet satisfaction that had little to do with recognition or authority. It came from knowing that the changes enacted were not for personal gain, but for the well-being of the team and the integrity of the mission. I had learned that leadership is a living practice, shaped as much by reflection, patience, and ethical decision-making as it is by decisive action in critical moments. Looking ahead, I understood that the path forward would require the same principles that guided me through the crisis: awareness, deliberate planning, and the courage to act when necessary. The lessons of integrity, resilience, and thoughtful strategy would remain essential, not only in professional challenges, but in guiding those under my care. Each day offered an opportunity to reinforce trust, empower others, and ensure that the foundation laid during this period of upheaval would endure. As I watched the sun set over the base one evening, the soldiers moving confidently through their drills, and the hum of life in the barracks settling into a steady rhythm, I felt a sense of peace and optimism. The journey had been difficult, but it had forged strength, clarity, and a deeper understanding of what it means to lead with purpose. And I realized that no matter the obstacles ahead, we were prepared, resilient, and capable of facing the future together.